The knock came at 2:17 a.m., sharp and desperate against the flimsy wooden door of my tiny apartment in Barcelona's El Born district, like a heartbeat stuttering in the dead of night. I bolted upright in bed, heart slamming against my ribs, the kind of jolt that makes you wonder if you've conjured ghosts from half-forgotten dreams. "Jamie?" "It's me," a voice rasped through the crack, muffled but unmistakable. "Rosalie, my best friend Sophia's older sister, the one who'd always been a shadow in our lives, elegant and untouchable, now sounding like she'd been shattered into pieces." I flung the door open before I could think better of it, and there she was, Rosalie Vargas, 32 to my 27, soaked from the Mediterranean drizzle that had turned the cobblestone streets into mirrors of regret. Her auburn hair clung to her cheeks in wet tendrils, her green eyes wild and red-rimmed, mascara streaking like war paint down her olive skin. She wore a silk blouse that had gone translucent, clinging to the curve of her shoulders, and jeans that hugged her legs like a second skin, practical armor for a woman who'd built her life on precision. But tonight, that armor was cracked wide open. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words, and before I could ask, she stepped inside, collapsing against me like a wave finally breaking on shore. We'd known each other for years, orbiting through Sophia's chaotic orbit. Sophia, my ride or die since we'd met as exchange students at NYU, the one who dragged me across the Atlantic to find ourselves in Spain after graduation. Rosalie was the golden child, 5 years older, the architect who'd traded Manhattan's skyline for Barcelona's Sagrada Familia sketches, always one step ahead, one promotion away from perfection. I'd crushed on her in secret during those sticky New York summers, stealing glances at family barbecues on the Vargas family's rooftop in Brooklyn, but she'd been straight as a ruler back then, engaged to some Wall Street prick named Marcus who collected watches like regrets. Sophia had rolled her eyes at my puppy dog stares, calling it a phase, but I'd buried it deep, loyal to the sister code. Now, here she was, trembling in my arms, the scent of her jasmine perfume mixing with rain and something sharper, whiskey, maybe, or just the salt of tears. I led her to the couch, an ancient velvet thing I'd scavenged from a flea market in Gracia, and wrapped her in the afghan my abuela had knitted before she passed. "Talk to me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, handing her a mug of chamomile tea that steamed like a fragile peace offering. She sipped it with shaking hands, her fingers long and elegant, the kind that could trace blueprints or, in my fevered imaginings, map the lines of a lover's back. "It's over," she said finally, staring into the mug as if it held the answers to a crumbling empire. "Marcus. He confessed everything this afternoon. The affairs, the lies. 3 years, Jamie. 3 years of building a life on sand." Her laugh was bitter, a shard of glass in the quiet room, and she set the mug down, her eyes lifting to mine, those green depths that had haunted my quieter moments. I drove around for hours, past the Ramblas, up to Montjuic, anywhere but home. And then I thought of you. Of how Sophia always says you're the one who holds it together when everything else falls apart. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Sophia was the firecracker, the one who'd convinced me to ditch my corporate drone job in Seattle for this expat dream, teaching English to wide-eyed kids in a sun-drenched school by the beach, nights filled with vermouth and vinyl records spinning in dimly lit bars. But Rosalie saw something else in me, or maybe she was just grasping at straws. "You're not falling apart," I lied gently, brushing a damp strand from her forehead. Her skin was warm under my fingertips, feverish almost, and the touch lingered a beat too long. She didn't pull away. We talked until the tea went cold, her words spilling out like confessions in a dimly lit cathedral. Marcus's betrayals weren't just flings, they were calculated, emails and hotel receipts she'd found tucked in his briefcase like dirty secrets. She'd confronted him in their sleek Isample flat, the one with the herringbone floors and views of gaudy undulating facades, and he'd admitted it all with the casual cruelty of a man who'd never truly loved. "I wanted the life we planned," she said, her voice cracking. "The wedding in the fall, the house in Saria. But he made me feel like I was the fool for believing in it." "You're not a fool," I said fiercely, my hand finding hers on the cushion between us. Her fingers intertwined with mine instinctively, cool and strong, and in that moment, the air thickened, charged like the storm clouds rolling in over the harbor. I'd always been the steady one, queer and out since 16, navigating hookups and heartbreaks with a pragmatism born of too many rainy Pacific Northwest winters. But Rosalie. She was a revelation, unraveling before me, her vulnerability stripping away the poise I'd idolized. As the clock ticked past 3, exhaustion pulled at her eyelids, heavy as the humid night air seeping through the cracked window. "Can I stay?" she murmured, not quite a question, her head lolling toward my shoulder. I nodded, guiding her to my bed, the narrow thing pushed against the exposed brick wall, sheets rumpled from my restless sleep. She curled into the pillows, still in her damp clothes, and I lay beside her, fully clothed, the space between us humming with unspoken electricity. Her breathing evened out, soft and rhythmic, but sleep evaded me. In the moonlight filtering through the shutters, I watched her, the faint freckles across her nose, the way her lips parted slightly, vulnerable in repose. It was innocent, that vigil, or so I told myself. But when her hand found mine in the dark, squeezing once, twice, as if anchoring herself to solid ground, something shifted inside me, a fault line cracking open. Dawn crept in slow and golden, painting the room in hues of amber and rose, the kind of Barcelona morning that made you believe in second chances. Rosalie stirred first, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine, surprise flickering there before softening into something warmer, deeper. "Morning," she whispered, her thumb tracing lazy circles on the back of my hand. We didn't move right away, tangled in that limbo between night and day, the world outside humming with the clatter of market vendors setting up stalls in the Placa de las Halles. "Thank you," she added, her voice husky with sleep. "For not turning me away." "Never," I replied, and meant it more than she could know. She sat up then, stretching like a cat in the sun, her blouse pulling taut across her chest, and for a reckless second, I imagined leaning in, closing the distance with a kiss that tasted of rain and redemption. But I didn't. Instead, I brewed coffee, strong, black, the way she'd always taken it during those rare visits to Sophia's old place, and we sat at my rickety kitchen table, knees brushing under the scarred wood. She talked more then, about the blueprints she'd been sketching for a community center in Poblenou, a project meant to give back to the neighborhood's immigrant families, her passion lighting her face like she'd reclaimed a piece of herself. I shared stories from my classroom, the kids' mangled English limericks that had me in stitches, the way one little girl, Maria, had drawn me a rainbow flag after I casually mentioned my girlfriend back in college. Rosalie listened, really listened, her gaze steady and kind, and when she laughed, a full, throaty sound that filled the room, I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. By 9, she was dry and composed, slipping back into the Rosalie the world knew, pulling her hair into a neat chignon, texting her assistant about rescheduling meetings. But as she shrugged on her jacket at the door, she paused, turning to me with an intensity that stole my breath. "Last night. It meant something, Jamie. More than I can say right now." Her fingers grazed my arm, light as a promise, and then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving the apartment echoing with her absence. I leaned against the wall, pulse racing, the coffee turning bitter on my tongue. Sophia texted then, oblivious, "Brunch at La Paradetta. Miss your face." I typed back a quick yes, shoving down the guilt bubbling up like sea foam. Rosalie was Sophia's sister, blood and history, and what I'd felt in that bed, that pull, that ache, was a line I couldn't cross. Not without consequences. But as I stepped into the bustling street, the sun warming my skin, the scent of fresh churros wafting from a nearby cart, I couldn't shake the feeling that the morning had rewritten us both. Barcelona had a way of doing that, peeling back layers until you faced the raw truth beneath. And mine. It whispered her name, Rosalie. Little did I know, the real storm was just gathering force. Sophia was already 3 vermuts deep when I slid into the booth at La Paradetta, her laughter cutting through the din of seafood platters and clinking glasses like a siren's call. There she is. My Pacific ghost, finally gracing the Mediterranean with her presence. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of salt and citrus, her dark curls tickling my cheek. At 27, Sophia was a whirlwind, petite, with the same olive skin and sharp jaw as Rosalie, but where her sister was measured elegance, Sophia was unfiltered chaos, a graphic designer who'd turned her freelance gigs into murals splashed across Barcelona's graffiti alleys. We'd been inseparable since freshman orientation at NYU, bonding over bad cafeteria ramen and worse exes. She'd come out as bi during a tequila-fueled rant about a frat boy who'd ghosted her, and I'd confessed my own tangled heart over late-night walks in Washington Square Park. Spain had been her idea, a 2-year adventure after graduation that stretched into 5, pulling me from my safe Seattle cocoon into this vibrant, unpredictable life. "Order the calamari," she urged, waving at the chalkboard menu. "It's fresher than Marcus's excuses." I froze mid-sip of my cava, the bubbles tickling my nose. "Marcus? What happened?" Sophia's eyes narrowed, playful suspicion flickering. "You haven't heard. Rosalie finally kicked his ass to the curb last night. Texted me at midnight, all caps, 'It's over. Details later.' I figured she'd crash at yours, you're closer to their flat than I am." She speared a shrimp with her fork, popping it into her mouth with relish. God, she deserves better. That guy's been a walking red flag since day one. My stomach twisted, heat creeping up my neck. She did crash at mine. Showed up soaked and wrecked around too. I kept my tone light, casual, but Sophia's fork paused, her gaze sharpening like she could smell the lie beneath my words. "And? Spill, Jameson. Did she ugly cry? Vomit on your rug? What's the damage report?" I forced a laugh, poking at my paella. "Just talked. A lot. She's gutted, soft. But strong. Already talking about diving back into that Pablo project." It was the truth, mostly, the hours of unraveling, the tentative rebuilding. But I omitted the hand-holding in the dark, the way her touch had lingered like a brand. Sophia nodded, satisfied, launching into her own drama, a client who'd stiffed her on payment for a festival poster, the cute barista at Federal Cafe who'd finally asked her out. We bantered like always, the easy rhythm that had carried us through breakups and border crossings, but my mind wandered back to that apartment, to Rosalie's quiet confessions. By the time we parted ways, her off to a design meetup in Sant Antoni, me to great papers under the shade of a ficus tree in Parc de la Ciutadella, I was a knot of contradictions, loyalty warring with longing. The text started that evening, innocuous at first. "Coffee tomorrow. My treat." I stared at the screen in my kitchen, the flame of the gas stove flickering like a warning. "Sure. 10 at El Magnifico." Her reply was instant, perfect. "Can't wait." I set the phone down, ignoring the flutter in my chest, and poured a glass of Rioja to steady my nerves. El Magnifico was a hole-in-the-wall roastery in the Gothic Quarter, all exposed beams and the rich, earthy perfume of beans grinding like secrets. Rosalie was already there when I arrived, perched on a stool by the window, sketching idly on a napkin, curves and angles that evoked the undulating lines of Casa Batlló. She looked different in daylight, refreshed, her hair loose in waves that caught the sun, a simple sundress in sage green that skimmed her knees. "You came," she said, standing to hug me, her arms wrapping around my shoulders with a warmth that felt dangerously familiar. "Wouldn't miss it." We ordered espresso for her, cortado for me, and settled into a corner table, the chatter of locals buzzing around us like benevolent bees. Conversation flowed easy, from her latest design frustrations to my students' latest antics, but undercurrents pulled at the edges, stolen glances, knees brushing under the table, the way her laugh softened when I spoke. "I keep replaying it," she admitted after her second sip, tracing the rim of her cup. "How I ignored the signs. The late nights at the office, the perfume that wasn't mine. I thought love was supposed to be safe." Her voice dipped, vulnerable again, and she reached across, her fingers covering mine. "But last night, with you, it felt real. Grounded." My breath caught, the cafe narrowing to just us. "Rosalie." I started, but she shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. Not saying it's anything. Just. Thank you. For being the kind of friend who sees through the bullshit. Friend. The word landed like a stone in still water. I nodded, squeezing her hand before pulling away, the moment fracturing but not forgotten. We parted with a promise of lunch soon, her kiss on my cheek lingering like a question mark. That afternoon, I met Aurelia for the first time in months. She'd been Sophia's roommate back in Brooklyn, a fiery Argentine transplant with a journalism degree and a knack for unearthing truths that stung. We'd circled each other warily, her straight-edge intensity clashing with my laid-back vibe, but she'd moved to Barcelona a year ago for a gig at El Periodico, crashing at Sophia's whenever her own flat and Les Courts flooded. Sophia had insisted on a girls' catch-up at a tapas bar in El Raval, and there she was, waving us over with her signature red lipstick and a cigarette dangling from her fingers. Jamie. The prodigal teacher returns. Aurelia air-kissed my cheeks, her dark eyes appraising. At 29, she was all sharp edges, bobbed black hair, tailored blazer over a band tee, the kind of woman who could charm a source or eviscerate a deadline. Sophia dove into gossip, but Aurelia's gaze kept drifting to me, probing. So, heard your place became Vargas Family HQ last night, she said casually, spearing an olive. Rosalie okay? I shrugged, playing it cool. As okay as she can be. Breakups suck. Aurelia's laugh was low, knowing. Tell me about it. Marcus was a prick, saw him flirting at that gallery opening last month. If she'd listened. She trailed off, but her eyes said more. I tried to warn her. Sophia shot her a look, but Aurelia just smirked, lighting another smoke. Anyway, Jamie, you single these days? Sophia says you've been dodging dates like they're tax audits. Heat flooded my face. Focused on work. You know how it is. She leaned in, voice dropping. Work's overrated. Life's too short for what-ifs. There was something in her tone, flirtatious. Calculating, that set my teeth on edge. But Sophia steered us to safer waters, and the night blurred into sangria and stories. The next week unfolded like a dream I didn't trust. Rosalie and I fell into a rhythm, stolen coffees turning to sunset walks along the Barceloneta boardwalk, her hand brushing mine as waves lapped at the sand. We talked dreams, hers of sustainable builds that honored the city's layered history, mine of writing a novel about expat misfits, and silences that spoke volumes, heavy with what we didn't say. One evening, as the sun dipped into the sea, painting the sky in fire, she stopped, turning to me with eyes like emeralds in the light. Jamie, I've never felt this before. Not with anyone. My heart thundered. Me neither. And then, impossibly, her lips met mine, soft, tentative, tasting of salt and possibility. It was a kiss born of fracture, healing in the salt air, and when we pulled apart, breathless, the world felt remade. But secrets have a way of surfacing in Barcelona's narrow alleys. A few days later, Sophia called, her voice tight. We need to talk. Now. My place. Dread coiled in my gut as I hurried through the rain-slicked streets to her Gracia walk-up, the kind with creaky stairs and balconies overflowing with geraniums. She was pacing when I arrived, wine glass in hand, Aurelia perched on the arm of the couch like a sentinel. What the hell, Jamie? Sophia exploded, thrusting her phone at me. A photo, me and Rosalie on the beach, mid-kiss, time-stamped from last night. Aurelia saw you too. Said it looked serious. Aurelia's eyes were cool, unapologetic. I was walking my dog near the lighthouse. Didn't mean to spy, but, Soph, your sister's fresh off a breakup. And with your best friend. It's messy. Betrayal hit like a slap. Aurelia, who'd positioned herself as the protector, had snapped the pic, sent it like ammunition. You photographed us. I demanded, voice low. Evidence, she said flatly. For her own good. Sophia's face crumpled, anger giving way to hurt. "You're my sister, Rosalie. And you," she jabbed a finger at me, "you're supposed to be my rock." "How long?" The room spun. "It's new. We didn't plan." "Get out," Sophia whispered, tears spilling. "Both of you." I fled into the night, rain mingling with my own tears, the city lights blurring into accusations. I'd crossed the line, shattered the trust that bound us. And as I stumbled home, Rosalie's text lit my screen, "Sophia knows. Meet me." The storm had broken, and we were drowning in its wake. The rain hadn't let up by the time I reached Rosalie's flat in the Eisample, a grand 19th-century building with ornate ironwork balconies that dripped like weeping statues. She buzzed me up without a word, and I took the stairs 2 at a time, my sneakers squelching on the marble treads. The door to her apartment swung open before I could knock, and there she stood, hair disheveled, eyes puffy, in an oversized sweater that swallowed her frame. "Jamie," she breathed, pulling me inside, her arms a lifeline in the chaos. The space was a testament to her vision, clean lines softened by potted olive trees and shelves of architecture tomes, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the stormy sprawl of Passaic de Gracia. But tonight, it felt hollow, the air thick with the scent of takeout pad thai gone cold on the coffee table. We collapsed onto the leather sectional, her head on my shoulder, my fingers threading through her hair as sobs racked her body, not for Marcus this time, but for the fracture we'd caused. "I called Sophia," she said finally, voice raw. She hung up on me. Screamed about betrayal, about how I always take what I want without thinking of the fallout. She lifted her head, green eyes searching mine. "And you?" "God, Jamie, I never meant to hurt her. Or you." The weight of it pressed down, "Sophia, our anchor, adrift because of us." "Aurelia," I spat, the name tasting like ash. "She didn't just see us, she hunted us down, turned it into a weapon." "Why?" Rosalie sighed, rubbing her temples. "Aurelia's always been intense. Back in New York, she had this crush on me, before Marcus. Nothing happened, but she never quite let it go. Sophia thinks she's just protective, but I wonder if it's more jealousy. Vindication. The possibilities twisted like vines, choking the air. We sat in silence then, the storm raging outside, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. My mind replayed the beach kiss, the joy of it, untainted, now poisoned by exposure. "What do we do?" I whispered, my hand finding hers, calluses from drafting tools rough against my palm. She squeezed back, resolve hardening her features. "We fight for it. For us. But first, we fix what's broken." The next morning, after a fitful sleep curled together on her bed, chaste, comforting, we drafted a letter to Sophia. Not a text, not a call, but words on paper, in Rosalie's elegant script, apologies woven with truths, promises to rebuild without erasing the love we'd found. "She deserves our honesty," Rosalie said, sealing the envelope with a kiss to the back flap. "Even if it means letting go." Delivering it was agony. Sophia's building in Gracia loomed like a sentinel, the buzzer echoing unanswered until a neighbor let me in, sympathy in her eyes, no doubt from the evening's drama filtering through thin walls. I slipped the envelope under the door, leaning my forehead against the wood, whispering, "I'm sorry, Soph. I love you." Then I walked away, the city's pulse mocking my fracture. The days blurred into a tense limbo. Rosalie threw herself into work, late nights at the drafting table turning her project into a beacon of hope, a community center with solar panels and open courtyards for storytelling circles, designed for families like the ones who'd raised us. I taught through a haze, my kids' energy a bomb, but evenings found me at her place, cooking paella from her abuela's recipe, the saffron threads dissolving like our defenses. We didn't rush intimacy, it built slow, in shared glances and tentative touches, a brush of lips over breakfast, her hand on the small of my back as we wandered the Boqueria market. It was romantic in its restraint, laced with the drama of what we'd risked, every moment a quiet rebellion against the hurt we'd sown. But Sophia's silence stretched, a chasm widening. Then, 2 weeks in, Aurelia called, unlisted number, voice like velvet over steel. We need to talk. Coffee. Neutral ground. I agreed, against my better judgment, meeting her at a nondescript cafe in Sants, far from our haunts. She arrived sharp as ever, sliding a latte my way without asking. Look, I get it, she started, no preamble. Rosalie's magnetic. Always has been. But Sophia's my family too. That photo. It was impulse, hurt her before she got hurt worse. By betraying her trust. I countered, voice low. You didn't protect, you ambushed. Her eyes flashed, then softened, a crack in the armor. Maybe. But here's the truth, Rosalie's not ready. Marcus broke her patterns, but you're just the rebound with a familiar face. She leaned in, voice dropping. Walk away, Jamie. For all of us. I left shaking, her words burrowing like thorns. That night, I confronted Rosalie, spilling it all over dinner, albondigas simmering on the stove, the kitchen warm with garlic and wine. Is it true? I asked, vulnerable in a way that terrified me. Am I temporary? She set down her spoon, crossing to me, cupping my face in her hands. No. God, no. You're the first real thing since. Ever. Her kiss was fierce then, pouring out the fear and fire we'd bottled, bodies pressing close in the steam haze light. It wasn't lust, it was affirmation, a vow etched in the curve of her mouth against mine. We made love that night, slow and sacred, discovering each other like architects mapping uncharted terrain, whispers of I love you, sealing the spaces between. The high tide couldn't last. Sophia's response came via text, a week later, Park. Noon. Come alone. My stomach nodded as I navigated the labyrinthine paths of Park Güell, the mosaic dragons gleaming under a relentless sun. She waited on a bench overlooking the city, thinner somehow, shadows under her eyes. I read the letter, she said flatly, not looking at me. 100 times. Soft. Let me finish. She turned then, hurt raw in her brown eyes. You're both idiots, you know that. Rosalie, chasing shadows after one disaster. You, my best friend, sneaking around like some guilty teenager. Tears welled, but she blinked them back. It feels like losing my family. Both of you. I knelt before her, grasping her hands. You're not losing us. We're messed up, yeah. But this, Rosalie and me, it's not a phase. It's home. The word hung there, true and terrifying. Sophia searched my face, the old trust flickering like a candle in wind. Eventually, she sighed, pulling me up. I need time. But don't disappear. Promise me that. I promise. Reconciliation with Rosalie came slower, a dinner at their family flat, awkward silences broken by shared flan and tentative laughs. Aurelia was absent, her role in the fracture unspoken but felt, a ghost we'd learned to exorcise later. By summer's end, as the city swelled with tourists and the air hummed with possibility, we'd woven a fragile new normal, Sophia and I rebuilding over Vermont runs, Rosalie and I stealing weekends in the Costa Brava, waves crashing like applause. It wasn't perfect, no sweeping redemption, no erasure of scars. Betrayal's echo lingered in quiet arguments, in the way Sophia's hugs held a beat too long, as if testing for cracks. But in the human mess of it, we found grace, love not as a fairy tale, but a blueprint, drawn with shaky hands yet standing firm. One evening, as the four of us, Sophia, Rosalie, me, and even a chastened Aurelia, invited as olive branch, gathered on Rosalie's balcony, the city sprawling golden below, Sophia raised her glass. To second chances. And to not being assholes about them. Laughter rippled, real and ragged, and Rosalie's hand found mine under the table, squeezing. Barcelona taught us that, Love's a drama, full of betrayals and breakthroughs, but in the end, it's the quiet mornings after the storm that change everything. And ours? It was just beginning.